Ready?
I think it's still morning, so I'll say good morning. Let me say once again thank you to all of you for being here, for being so persistent and showing your resilience and patience with this process. I'm happy to see that now you have better chairs. So as I've said before, bit by bit, it seems that by the end of this process that you may end up with an entire news, what I'd say a news room per se, not to associate with anything. But I wanted to report on the progress inside as to what we have been informed of so far. Everything seems to be going very well. They're very methodical. We've seen, based on the SORs, I can't say exactly how many were completed because I just left. But based on the SORs, it seems as though the pace is starting to pick up, which is very good for us. We are also seeing that there are discrepancies based on the previous declarations by Mr. Mingo compared to the ones that we are seeing on the SORs for Region 4. This obviously tells a different story compared to what happened or what transpired previously. What is also happening in there is, even though the order says one person per party per counting station in the areas where they contested, we have seen APNU AFC in some cases wanting to put 2 or 3 people in a room. And this morning we were informed of Valerie Guerrero, the previous minister within the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, going into a room and trying to dictate to the GECOM staff in there how to do their job and what it is. That in itself is a clear violation of the order, which says only 1 party agent per station at a time. Valerie Guerrero went into the room and wanted to dictate to the Guyana Elections Commission how to go about the process. Not recognizing, or maybe they recognize, but they did not want to adhere to the order as it stands. There are rooms where previous ministers would walk in without even asking permission or identifying themselves. And once again, those things are clearly in violation of the order. That being said, I would commend the GECOM staff for what they've done so far and how they're conducting themselves. We look forward to the process going along smoothly, and hopefully we are going to get a better gauge as to where we are and how we are going to move forward after today's events. We have not had a chance to meet with the Commission or to have a discussion with them as yet as to how we're going to correct the small errors that we are seeing, but we are going to keep pressing on that. Yesterday there was a lot of confusion. I think Mr. Jonas would have spoken amply on his issue, so I won't touch that. But there was a lot of confusion in the AP and UFC trying to change the narrative of these elections, the attempt to want to undermine things and all of these things. And I have to commend the reporting by the majority of you here in debunking most of the falsities and untruths that these people are peddling. There seems to have been a concerted effort to want to undermine the process. We are still very vigilant and we are still very cautious that they are going to attempt to do that and continue. So while this morning ran fairly smooth, we are still very, very watchful and cognizant that there may be other personalities who will want to infiltrate this afternoon's events and want to derail it. This morning we saw, when we went in there, one of the APNU AFC personnel who was going into the recount clearly disobeying police instructions, not wanting to adhere to their instructions, not coming when she was called, and that was Miss Carol Joseph. I walked in directly behind her team, and it was evident there. A very intimidating figure, and I'm hopeful that the police and the Guyana Elections Commission staff will put an end to this kind of bullying tactics to people who potentially want to undermine the process. And we look forward to a very progressive afternoon. At the end of the day, I think we are going to have a better gauge as to where we are and how we're going to get this concluded, hopefully expeditiously. Right? Thank you.
You seem to, most of what you're saying, it seems like you're saying that most of the discrepancies or some of the stuff that you saw this morning from persons were party is it just from one section of the political atmosphere? Or?
Well, when you look at everything that transpired from March 2nd to now, there has only been one party that has continuously objected to everything. All 11 parties contested these elections, of which 10 parties, the Liberty and Justice Party included, continuously advocated for the laws of Guyana to be complied with and adhered to. And there has only been one party that has continuously sought to undermine the process. So it is not targeting one party, it is just identifying the pattern that continues to exist.
Mr. Schuman, have you raised any, you're the leader of the Liberty and Justice Party, have you raised concerns with what you're seeing as a party leader to GECOM, and how many of these were in writing that would, if possible, ever submitted?
We continue to bring these issues up with the Commission, with various commissioners, but once again, we have not been permitted the opportunity to meet with the entire Commission to air our concerns. So at times we have to communicate to the commissioners themselves, and hopefully they're going to have that opportunity to bring it when the Commission meets, because the Commission meets every single day to assess what the progress is. And when we're not given an opportunity to meet with the Commission, then obviously we cannot air our concerns.
Mr. Schuman, isn't there a complaint mechanism in place that GECOM has put in place where you start with the coordinator of our respective stations and then you take it from there and you go up there?
My apologies. My apologies. Could you repeat that question?
Isn't there a complaint mechanism in place where that if you have an issue or some disparity, that you can report to the coordinator of the station, and from the coordinator it moves to the different level, the chief elections officer, and from there the Commission? Have you been utilizing the mechanism that is
the mechanism is being utilized to the extent that those are dealt with in isolation. Pretty much if something happens in a room, it is meant the order pretty much dictates the conflict resolution mechanism, and we adhere to that. But in some of these instances, when these previous ministers walk in, they still seem to think that they're occupying a substantive portfolio, and the intimidation that is present in their presence, that becomes really, really difficult, especially when people cannot, what I'd say, I don't want to say cannot articulate themselves, but feel intimidated to articulate themselves.
Aren't you exposed to the same opportunity, because, for instance, Mr. Nandalal said yesterday that the GECOM chair is on the floor along with Commissioner, and she's very accessible. And so, he was able to talk to her on many occasions on the floor yesterday. Are you exposed to the same opportunity?
Well, there's one thing. Speaking to Madam Chair and speaking to an individual commissioner, it is not speaking to the Commission. What we would like is an opportunity to speak to the entire Commission so that our issues could be addressed at a Commission level, not at an individual level. And yes, we do have communications time to time with Madam Chair to provide clarity on some things. But once again, we don't know that those issues are being brought up at the Commission level and are being addressed appropriately at that level.
Political parties have filed complaints on various issues. Have you decided to do the same thing? Okay, this is my complaint, this is something that I've seen. Have you decided to file a complaint?
We have not gotten to that point yet. It is something that we have composed a letter. We are obviously looking at, because the Liberty and Justice Party is part of a joiner. We have partners in this political race, which are the New Movement and a New and United Guyana, and we want consensus on any communication that emanates from our collective camps. That being said, we did compose a letter to be submitted to the Elections Commission. We're just waiting for the party leaders to sign on to that, and then it would be served to the Commission, and it would also be made available to the press.
Thank you.